Hello, I'm Ellen Gumming, and my business is the PR Training Academy. I'm also a member of the Executive Committee of EDL, the European Association of Distance Learning. I'm delighted to be hosting this series where we introduce you to some of our members and we learn a little bit more about them. Today, I'm chatting with Susan Johnson from Mooka Media. Susan, thanks for joining me.
Hey, how's it going?
Now, I want to ask you about forming Mooka Media because it kind of came out of the fact that you were involved in publishing for years beforehand. Give me something about your own background, if you would.
At this stage, I'm nearly 20 years working in e-learning. So I started out in corporate e-learning. I then moved into working in universities, doing postgraduate online courses, and then went to government e-learning in Australia. And when I came back from Australia, I was working in educational publishing in Ireland, and that's for the skills market. So I was working in a publisher based in Dublin for about 3 years, managing the digital department. And yeah, Mooca came as a result of me leaving that company and wanting to do our own products, really, like ones that targeted skills, but more interactive, more designed for kids. Because particularly in the skills context, the design is teacher-led, and when you're working in the publisher, the primary objective is that the book is the main product, and I think less attention went to digital. So when your background is in digital education, it was the only time digital education had actually felt marginalized. But then when we set up Mooka Media, we became a services company rather than doing a product, and we work with the publishers doing digital products for them. We work with corporate clients globally at this stage, and some further education institutes as well. And we're now talking with a university, so hopefully move into that market as well. So it's actually great because it's a big mix. Like, yeah, it's not just schools, it's not just adults. It's a broad range of subjects.
And when you say you're working with schools publishers, is it still primarily books, or has it moved way beyond that?
Primarily books. The main digital product would be ebooks, so it's basically a conversion of the book, and they do digital resources that we use in the classroom, but the resources are sold to, they're not sold. If you sign up, the school signs up to the program with the books, they will get access to digital resources that the teacher can use in the classroom with the kids.
So this is like PowerPoints and things like that?
They provide PowerPoints too, but they do interactive games based, mainly for the primary school age. For post-primary, it tends to be PowerPoints because they've got a shorter class. The teachers maybe move between the classrooms, but at primary they have an interactive whiteboard. It might be kind of small activities. They're very short and very granular, but you could have a few hundred digital resources to accompany a book.
So you do that kind of work with schools. I was looking on your website, and you also do some work with the Polio Foundation, Polio Eradication Project, and that's World Health Organization and UNICEF. Now, I know there's a lot of that you can't talk about, but tell me what you can talk about on that project, because it sounds like a fantastic project. It's very global.
Yeah, that one was brilliant. That was working with the World Health Organization, and they have a polio team within there working with the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. So we did two projects, one for the WHO, one that was released on the UNICEF site for the GPI. They're both live, they're both publicly accessible. It's just, as a services provider, we usually can't really talk about what we're working on with which clients and and some clients don't even like us to mention that we work with them, and the WHO is one of those.
I suppose from your point of view, like, so long as they pay the bills and they're happy with the quality of work that you're doing and they keep coming back to you, that's the main thing. It's just the idea that polio is still an issue in the world, I suppose, is what really catches you on your website. You think, wow, polio eradication is still out there. I suppose like TB. All of these diseases are still out there. They're not in the developed world.
I can't remember the target off the top of my head now, but they have a target of when they will have it eradicated. And I know the initiative started in, I think it was 1989, and it was maybe about 42 countries that they had polio endemic at that stage, and now it's down to 2. So I think it's Afghanistan and Nigeria, only 2 countries left. I mean, I think in October 2019, it was eradicated from one of the countries. So you still will get outbreaks, but it's not wild polio.
We're also working for digital health, global education.
we're producing e-learning courses for DHGE, I shorten it down to. They work with universities in the States to do healthcare courses for healthcare professionals. So we might be working on courses for nurses or project management for healthcare professionals. One of them we worked on with them was for a mini MBA, but short courses. So we're just doing a series of courses with those at the moment, and we're mainly on the design side, and that's the thing about our company and the different projects we work on. Some projects we will write the content and that's all we do. Some projects we'll just do the design. Some projects we do it completely end to end, so we may research the content, work with an SME. So in the polio one, we worked with the SMEs in the WHO, with this one, the DHG, they have their own SMEs in universities, and we work with their material, and it's more of a design focus that we're bringing to it, and we're enhancing the visuals, while in other companies we may build it or may do everything. So it's always a big mix of what we work on. So.
And when you say you enhance the visuals, are you doing like you do video content? Do you do sort of cartoon type content? Is it everything? Do specific clients say, I don't want this, I want that?
It depends on the client. They may want a video, they may want a talking head, they may want to have cartoons. For kids particularly, they may want cartoons, someone may explain visual styles. Our focus tends to be on interactive learning design rather than the video content, but we do video occasionally. It's one of the things, I suppose, about e-learning, corporate e-learning as an industry is like people want it rapid and they want it as quick and develop as possible. So I often feel like the education focus isn't necessarily in the same way as you are if you're working in a third level institution, where you may be working with students on an evaluation of how effective it was. When you're working for smaller companies, they may want e-learning courses as quickly and cheaply as possible. So if you go on down that route, you cut the rich media, so you wouldn't be doing video and animation as much then, and you get the end result through the interactive. We've even had projects where what they want us to do is design an e-learning course, and it's not even intended for students, it's to help sell a product, because particularly when you work in the corporate element of it, there's a lot of products on the market like authoring tools, learning management systems, and you can design courses to showcase the features of that tool, and that helps them promote it and sell it. So there's different angles that we work on in different projects.
That's very clever, actually. So if you're thinking of using this tool, have a look at this. This is what it does. This is how you use it. This is how simple it is, or whatever. Very smart.
Because it's not like you can give someone PowerPoint, but what you do in PowerPoint compared to someone else could be radically different. One person can make it look great and nice. Someone else was just black and white text on a few bullet points. And the same with an e-learning and authoring tool, like it also depending on the tool, because some have preset templates that you fill content in, some there is far more design scope for flexibility in what it will look like. So if they want to really market the tool and how to show how you can use in context, design a sample course to do that. And then it has double use of, you actually might be able to sell it on as well. Yeah.
And do you find when you're designing courses that you design them in a different way depending on the age group? I'm really conscious that I was talking to somebody last week or the week before, and they were talking about young people, not young as in smallies, kind of 20-year-olds, that kind of age group, and that they are moving away from looking at real people. Apparently we offend, and they would much prefer to look at animation. And it just struck me that animation for somebody at my age group, if you're trying to teach me, animation would annoy me. I would rather have a real human being. So does it differ according to the age group that you're targeting? Or is it maybe depending on the industry you're in?
It differs. It can differ. You should be designing for the audience and you should be designing for the context of use, but budget is often a factor. So filming, well, actually, if you're filming on Zoom, it's probably now a cheaper alternative to actually getting a film crew and having a day with, the lights and I think even with COVID, people are more comfortable with cheaper production values, which is probably not great for the video production industry, but anyway, it's there. And
it's one of the industries that has changed massively, actually, because of COVID.
Massively. Yeah. Well, but then, so yeah, you are designing for who it is. Like, for example, like when we do work with the publishers, we are designing the primary user of the digital resources may be designed to be used in a classroom with junior infants, so 5 or 6 year olds, or 4 to 5 year olds. But they may not be the primary user of that resource. They might be projected on interactive whiteboards. So you're thinking in how the delivery. So you're not designing for an iPad where you just have it here and you can click. You're designing for a big screen like this. So if the child is being brought up to the board, you have to think about what can they reach. So you put the buttons down the bottom of the screen. You may put teacher controls at the top. So you design the interface for where it may be used in the classroom. If you're designing for an app and the kid is the primary user, you've a different scope of space on screen that you can work with. But I know that's slightly different to the cartoon, but yeah, cartoon could annoy if you don't design it right. So you have to think about the learner, what they're trying to do, what the learning outcomes are, because particularly when you're dealing with older audiences, you have to make the learning relevant to them and their job. Otherwise, it's just, I mean, a lot of people don't want to do training anyway. So, and quick next, get over it as quick as possible. So if you make it relevant, it's going to resonate more, they'll remember it. And then you build in kind of the interactions and activities and exercises to kind of build on that and recall and reinforcement. But if you bring out like a dancing mouse to a 20-year-old or a 25-year-old or a 45-year-old, like, it may not go down as well.
But that's really interesting that an older audience, if I got you right, and I may be misinterpreting what you said, but an older audience is looking for like an educational outcome. So it's, what did I learn? I need something that I can put in a mental box and say, that was worth me devoting time to because I learned X. Whereas a younger audience is happy to be trained and just pick up new skills. There's less of a demand on a tick box outcome is wrong, but there's less of a demand to be able to actually categorize what the outcome was.
Well, there's two things. I'll get to the second. I don't think it's necessarily an age group on that, because the learning outcome doesn't necessarily have to be apparent to the learner. As in, you don't have to tell them upfront this is learning outcome, because that's the bit they're going to skip, because that's probably the boring bit. But it still has to be relevant to a kid, because otherwise, going, what are we doing this for? Like, so like. I mean, they might be doing that anyway if the class are doing it at school, but it still has to have a relevance. Otherwise, you're going to turn people off. You have to kind of engage them, and you have to build in the motivation and why they're doing it. Like, and if that's not there, you are kind of struggling. But the other angle is, when we, as a services company, and even in e-learning, it's different to working in a university where you may get feedback from the students. We're always out of removed, so we don't get feedback on how well it went. How well the training went down and how people reacted to it. So an instructional model of analyze, design, develop, implement, evaluate. We do all of that apart from evaluate, because when you're services, you hand over after the development and you don't get to evaluate how effective the learning was, how the learners reacted to it. And that stops you, and that element of evaluation review kind of takes away from you the opportunity to refine what you've done for the next project. But if you have repeat projects with someone, the opportunity kind of should be there. I mean, when I did work with publishers, I was always asking the sales team, or the sales people I knew, can you give me feedback on how teachers are responding to it? Because if you don't know that, you don't know what you're designing, how effective it is.
So do you test market something before you actually give it to the client as a final product?
In most jobs and in most projects, you don't, because you don't have access to the learners. And in corporate e-learning, they may want us to design a learning program that they will sell on. So they may not know who their learners are. But then I have worked on projects where we have, about 15 years or so ago, I worked for the BBC. And as part of, and we were working on a learning project for the skills market. So we did the user testing before we went out. So initially we did focus testing, and that was actually what you brought up earlier on about the cartoons and what would resonate quite well with the audience. So we showed them different visuals, different characters, because we're working with teenagers, and go, what appeals to you? Even the language, like if we have teenage characters in this series, because it was the BBC and they wanted they like video, so there was a video-based angle to it as well as the interactive. So like, if someone said cool, do you say cool or do you say mint, or what's the trend? What's the term that's kind of circulating? Because if you use the wrong slang or even language for that age, you're just going to turn them off, and you don't want to turn them off
completely. They end up looking at it and thinking this was designed by old people. Yeah,
exactly. And then you kind of do a mock-up in PowerPoint and mock up the functionality, and you kind of run through it, and would you play that? And you get feedback on what games are you playing, what games are you playing? Because I mean, in terms of ideas to particularly when you're working on the kids' content, where you've got more scope for kind of creative input, going, what games are you playing in your part-time or your spare time? Like, so not educational ones, because usually the educational ones are, they're not playing them. And then and you use that for ideas of what you can build in, what can you apply, what techniques, what's the appeal of that, and what can you bring that into what you're designing. So then we would have gone out as well. Then once we had versions in development, we've gone out and tested it again with the kids. So there was a lot of refining and testing process, and that was probably the only project where we've actually had that access to do that. And it was brilliant. It helped you shape the product or the learning solution into what may appeal to the kids. And I remember going into one classroom and the teacher seemed quite cynical about what we were doing would be, and then like after half an hour she goes, that's actually quite good, like, because she was shocked, like she wasn't expecting.
You won her over.
Yeah. And then we did this series of videos with this character, and kids go, we play another one. And then you know when you got 14-year-olds kind of going, we have another, watch another one.
They bought in, yeah.
And it was in Irish language as well, and they still wanted to see more of it. Like, so it was I'm nothing against Irish, but no, it's another language, but they still had the appeal, and they were interested in it. So yeah, so it's designing for your audience, and if you can have that access, that's fantastic. But I found a lot of the time in e-learning, you don't. Like, I think if you're working in an institution where you have access to students, you can do that. When you're in the corporate environment, you usually don't, unless you're already in a company. So if you were a training department within a company, then you could talk to your colleagues about it. But when your service is outside, you're just so much more removed that you don't have access to the potential.
I just think that makes it really, really difficult, that you don't have that natural feedback. Tell me something though, you're super busy, right? So you're working on all of these different projects, and yet a little birdie whispered in my ear that you don't do any marketing.
It probably has impacted our growth as a company. We founded 7 years ago now, like from next month. But initially I've had a lot of jobs, and through that I knew people. So when we started out, it was when people have thought of gone freelance or independent or setting up a company, I got work through that. People knew me and knew it was available. And my co-founder Lee, so I would be content development, instructional design, and he's software engineer, educational technologist, and he worked in Queen's University. So we both got a strong background. So sometimes they'll come into either one of us, but I was more known. So, and then you start building the portfolio, and I think the only bit of marketing I did, but the most effective probably thing we've done is we joined the e-learning industry website. We have ourselves listed on that, and there's another one called e-learning list, and they sometimes post jobs. So we've got a couple of clients from that. And in general, I don't know, I always forget to ask where people found us, but people just contact us. So so a lot of business we get is just from people just coming through and contacting us.
Reputation precedes you, obviously. How big is the team?
It's 6. we're quite small, and then we have contractors we work with, our suppliers, depending on the project, because every project is different. So some project maybe just be design, some maybe just content, some maybe end-to-end, or so maybe HTML5 development, so we need software input. Other ones would be an authoring tool, so you can have more people on that or ramp up the team. It depends what it is like. But so even initially, as we're expanding and we get more work on, the recruitment side is more difficult unless you can have someone who can work on design, content, instruction design, and authoring, because you need to be able to follow them at every project you have. So, because if you had every project you had involved technical writing, we can hire for writers, but we can't, because the next project you may not need them on that. Like, but
so when you contract out, do you contract out to people all over the world, or is it mostly Ireland, UK?
It's mostly Ireland, UK, or mostly people we know, or again, contacts, lots of jobs. As much as I've got work through that, I know people who I can kind of call on through that.
But it also means you're working with people you can trust and that you know will deliver and won't let you down.
Well, that's the big thing, and I would be in no rush to expand, because I don't want to impact the quality of what we do. I mean, we're a small company, and there's a lot of competition out there in terms of e-learning development. So what does make you distinct from someone else? And it would be the fact that we do have strong backgrounds in instructional design, educational design, and we don't want to lose that, because someone can get an instructional design job. It's one of actually my bugbears about the industry, that there's no entry requirements to it. So you can get in as a job as an instructional designer because you pass a writing test, or you might be able to do graphic design, and then you're designing educational materials, but someone wouldn't walk into a classroom and start teaching because they speak well. So it's one thing. But we were working for a while, and we're an animator in Argentina. So people over the world are there. If you can work with them, and you know, as long as you have good comms, it just doesn't matter where they are, really. Like, you know, as long as the work is, and they work well with you, so.
I think the living proof about instructional design was you actually explaining that interactive whiteboard and how high can a child reach. That is my takeaway from today's chat. I must admit that, like, the level of detail, and actually you don't think about it at all until somebody designs it the wrong way, and then you end up saying, what idiot put that, you know, something up that high and a child can't get to it. You said that you joined 2 different websites, both of which were geared to e-learning, and both of which are bringing you in business, basically. But you're also a member of EDL, the European Association of Distance Learning. So why did you join us, and what's the benefit of membership to you?
Well, I joined EDL after going to a conference in Copenhagen, which I think is about 4 years ago now. And I was interested because it was a European conference, and it was the time I wasn't quite doing marketing, but I was having my attempt at business networking, and because, like, setting up a business, like, all I've ever done is e-learning, instructional design, and the design and development process, and that's what I enjoy. But when in the business side, you actually have to force yourself to do that to get something off the ground. And I just was so impressed at that conference. I thought it was brilliant, and it was such a mix as well. That you got people from third level institutions, you got people from corporate companies, startups, and small, like 1 to 2, 3 people companies, as well as larger ones. And every single session, everyone really knew the stuff, and I was just so impressed by it, because I've been to events. Yeah, but like you've been to a lot of conferences and exhibitions, and you tend to meet the business development people who may be selling you a tool, or selling you a technology, or selling you a course, and you know they're just a salesperson who don't really know about anything about designing it. Well, you were there and you were listening to people who are working with students, or working with design process, and they knew what they were talking about. And it was, I thought it was. And also what I like about it is European, and there's different countries, and it's a wider sphere, because you're in Ireland as well. It's a small country on an island on the edge of Europe, and a small population, so it'd be quite insulated if you don't try and look beyond that. And we have joined kind of another network in the UK, just to see what the UK is, but it's only focused on e-learnings, which is a narrower market, while EDL is broader. And then the networks in Ireland were either learning technologies, which to me is quite narrow and not a field, because the technology's changed. That's the transient bit. The bit that interests me is learning design, and then how you apply that to a technology, or how you manipulate it to get it to work for you. Or the education, with higher education, but that can be more of a blended asynchronous, synchronous, using the learning management system, and integrated with more traditional lecturing. And it's changed massively, even from when I worked in the University of Ulster, I don't know how many years ago, but no, so at EDL, I just thought, I really liked it for the range of people involved with it, and the mix, and it's European, just the diversity of that, and seeing what people are doing in different countries. And so,
see, I think you're a classic entrepreneur, and I think you do marketing without realizing you do marketing. So your networking is your marketing. You're either picking up that industry information about, you're soaking what's happening within the industry and learning from it, but you're also giving out, when you start talking about the industry that you're in, your passion just shines through. I mean, I'm sitting here fascinated by an area that would not generally, I have to tell you, get me out of bed in the morning to have a cup of coffee. But I think you do an awful lot more marketing than you actually realize you do. Susan Johnson from Mooka Media, I enjoyed talking to you today. Thank you for joining me.
No problem. Thank you.
Well, now, I'm Ellen Gunning from the PR Training Academy. That is our interview for today. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. My guest was Susan Johnson from Mooka Media. This series is sponsored by PR Training Academy and EDL, the European Association of Distance Learning. Until next time, stay safe. Bye-bye. Essential online training solutions for communications professionals. The PR Training Academy.